Welcome to another episode of Bestseller TV. It is great to be with you. I'm Rhett Power, one of your hosts. My other host is right over here next to me. Hey, Cynthia.
Hi, Rhett. How are you? It's great
I'm
to
great.
see you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's good to be back. We've got Joe Hart today. Joe is now the CEO of Carnegie Global, and I'm sure you know who Dale Carnegie is. And and he's just written a new book with actually Carnegie's grandson uh, about intentional living for a post-pandemic anxious world. It's called Take Command, and it just hit the Wall Street bestseller list, which is phenomenal. And Joe is I'm guessing a happy to not be practicing law anymore, a former attorney, as he smiles, and turned entrepreneur. He was founded and ran the e-learning company Info Alley, and which served companies like McGraw-Hill and Motorola. Also, Asset Health, which is a health tech company, and now in 2015 went over to run Dale Carnegie's global uh, operations. Uh, Joe, welcome and congratulations on the bestseller list with Take Command, and welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks, Rhett. It's nice to be with you. Cynthia, great to be with you too.
the honor is all mine. I was looking at your bio, and someone said to me, if you want to be successful, you work in education and healthcare, and you've done healthcare, education, law, like you're every like mother's dream child. I have to know why, after all of this success, why write a book now, and why this book?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you again for asking the question. And just to go back to Rhett, I started my career as an attorney. I like to think it's a recovering attorney. It really is a 12-step program. Left the practice of law and went into business. But, part of the reason I left the practice of law ultimately and went into business was Dale Carnegie. I took a Dale Carnegie course when I was in my 20s. It led me to really rethink my vision. It's had a huge impact on my life. I took a Dale Carnegie course. My wife, my 6 kids have all taken Dale Carnegie programs. So this is a program that's been hugely transformational for me. And, and it's been a really big part of my leadership and my journey. And then, we got into COVID, and boy, that was something that just really it hit the world hard, clearly. And it hit our business very hard. At the time that COVID hit, we were 95% in-person, face-to-face training around the world, 200 operations, 86 countries. Almost all of that was in person. And, so I had one of these just gut check moments, even in terms of my leadership, and ultimately was grateful. This was part of the reason why we wrote Take Command, because the principles of Dale Carnegie not only helped me get through that from a leadership standpoint, and I think have helped me become a better leader. Our whole organization has come out of COVID much stronger. And I look at the world today, and this is when I reached out to Michael Crom in the midst of COVID saying, the world is really struggling. It's really hurting emotionally as much as anything else. And what if we could write a book built on Dale Carnegie's principles for today's generation, with lots of current stories and situations that people can relate to, and bringing in research and so forth. So the goal was to build on Dale Carnegie's the brilliance of how to win friends and influence people, how to stop worrying and start living, and to really get it to people in a way that could help them, not only coming out of that pandemic, but in the years to come.
I don't know how to ask the question, but I I want to go back a little bit before we get into more of the strategic vision of the book. Is the book 7 Habits of How to Influence People, is that still relevant today, you think?
You mean How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Yes.
Yes. That book, it's interesting you ask, because, and I know you're a best-selling author, Rhett. This has been a best-selling book for 87 consecutive years. And you wonder why and how. And part of it is because the ideas that Dale Carnegie was developing and innovating around 100 years ago, 87 years ago, are every bit as important today, maybe even more so, because I think as much as there's technology and so forth, we're still people. We still have, a craving to be appreciated and valued, and we want relationships and quality relationships. In fact, the world's so polarized, and as much as there's technology, we're disconnected, we're alienated, we're isolated. And so, so much of Dale Carnegie's ideas are about bringing people together and helping people have these strong relationships and to succeed. If it's in our families or with our friendships or in our work, the people who excel in work are often the people who are really adept at interacting with other people, which is why, How to Win Friends continues to be so popular today.
87 years. Oh my gosh. Like, that is not everybody who reads that book. I mean, a lot of people have been reading it, end up running the company. So there must be something about the way you think that led you down this path. And are you touching at all, like, which aspects of your career do you touch on in the book? Which
aspects of my career?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of stories that go from really the early part of my career throughout, some of the difficult decisions and challenges that I had, starting a business with nothing, leaving a great job when I had 2 young children at home, navigating a business through a startup, post 9/11 and the internet bubble and that type of thing. And then, right up through Dale Carnegie and COVID. So, that's, and I hope, Cynthia, that a lot of the lessons that I've learned and that Michael have learned over the years and the wisdom will be helpful to people, because we've had these experiences, and there's just things that's like, gosh, I wish I had known in my 20s the things that I know now. And so much of that building a Dale Carnegie is forming the framework of this book, this taking command, being intentional.
I mean, did you struggle with the title? I mean, I love the title. I think it's powerful and it speaks to me in a lot of ways. And I often, when we write these books and we do this, we kind of labor over it. What was how did Take Command? How did that title come to you?
Yeah, it's interesting, Rhett. We had Take Command had been a mantra in Dale Carnegie. I think we came out with that kind of terminology in 2018, and it really is about, it's strong language, right? I mean, it's take command, but it's take command of your life, take command of your business, take command of your health, take command of your thoughts, take command of your emotions, take command of your relationships. So, it really has had some resonance in Dale Carnegie. We were talking about it for a period of time. I actually host a podcast called the Dale Carnegie Take Command Podcast, which we formed in January of 2020 of all time. So when it came time to the book, it's funny because it seemed like a natural title to me and to Michael, my co-author. But Simon and Schuster had said, hey, this is a strong title. You want to call it something else. And so, but ultimately we said, you know what? This is a book about action. It's really a book about, this is the life that we have. We want to live the best, most full life we can. So we want to encourage people. Hey, look, this isn't think about it. This isn't study about it. This isn't, this is, hey, take command right now. So we really felt that was the right title.
Yeah, that's very fitting. I'm taking myself back to March of 2020 for a second. And you're describing this, idea of being intentional and really making choices that you're aware of, not just the ones that sort of guide you. In the process of writing the book, the world came back. I don't know if we say what the term is. When, did you time the launch appropriately? Because this is about, we went through this post-COVID world, or did that come later when you realized post-COVID was a thing?
Yeah, it really happened. So the idea of the book, the first conversation I had with Michael was in June 2020. And it's funny when you said, hey, go back to March 2020. I think it's easy at this time to kind of forget. At that particular point, there was so much uncertainty. We didn't know what was going to happen. We were still in lockdowns. It was a lot of fear and anxiety and stress. And there still is, of course, today. So we knew at that time that writing a book, it probably wouldn't come out until after the COVID crisis had passed. But, the idea was, whether it's during COVID or after COVID, these things are still going to apply, meaning, and the book is broken into 3 parts. Take command of your thoughts and your emotions, right? So we all have fears and insecurities and worries and stresses. And why is it you could have 2 people who are in the same situation, and then one person, they're resilient, they're courageous, the other is just struggling. And so the idea here was, even for a post-pandemic world, hey, we're going to have all kinds of challenges. So how do you help take command of your thoughts and your emotions, and taking command of your relationships? Critical people, difficult people. Do we have boundaries for ourselves? How do you build trust and build enduring relationships? So that was the second kind of idea, build on Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and then take command of your future. One of the things, Rhett and Cynthia, that we researched was, what's the biggest regret that people have on their deathbed? And it has been that I didn't live courageously. I didn't live the life I wanted to live. Yeah. And what a horrible thing for someone to get to that stage of their life to say, and I can't do anything at this point. So this idea of taking command of our future is, hey, do it right now. Don't wait. Don't waste another day. Start to think about your vision and your values and your purpose, and as you define it for yourself, and really take action. So to your question, it really was, I wish that we had this almost before COVID, because I think it could have been very helpful. And at the same time, our hope is right now that this is something that really is a manual for empowering people for living really a more full and complete life.
Well, it goes, and I hate to put these 2 things together, but we're in the midst of this quiet quitting thing that you hear, quiet quitting revolution that we talk about, we hear a lot about. There's high levels of disengagement or unengagement. I can't speak English today, but people are highly not engaged in their work. Part of that's our fault as leaders, I think. But to me, this is for 2 audiences. This is for the people who have quit and who don't like what they're doing. They don't love the life that they have. They're searching for their thing. They're searching for what's going to give them that fulfillment. And the other audience for this book, I think, is for our leaders. But I want to ask, how do we, we're asking people to do more with less. We're asking people to manage remote working. We're asking people to manage and do more. How do we do that effectively? And I know you talk about this in the book. You use the examples of Disney and Amazon and Starbucks, cutting staff. But how do we manage with less? Because I think we're all trying to do that, and I don't think we're doing it very well. I guess that was my point, is we're failing as leaders to manage with less. We're not doing our people a great service, and I think that's why people are not engaged in their work. How do we fix all that? To me, it's messy. You and I both work in companies, we're coaches, and I just see messes every day that I go into these companies, and there's just it's hard to even know where to begin sometimes on how to work in some of this. How do we do it? And you said this is a guide for that. And
it's a guide. I think you framed it really well from my standpoint. You've got, just using the employer side of this, or the leader follower. You've got people who are struggling. They're struggling, and they're looking at, maybe I'm doing more with less. I'm tired. I'm stressed. And how do I get through this? So there's, how am I going to see this? How am I going to how am I going to grow? How am I going to lead? How am I going to get the types of things that I really want to have in life? And then what's the role of the leader? Am I creating, as a leader, the culture that's going to bring out the best in people? Do I even see that? Do I think about it? Because this is a really, someone could look at this, a leader could look at this and say, gosh, this is really hard. In fact, I talk to many CEOs who will say, this is the hardest period of time I've ever had to lead. It was easy when I had people back in one place, but now I've got some people remote, and I've got some people in the office, and they're in the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but they're not there. Okay. So what does taking command mean? Taking command means, what's the kind of culture that you want to create? What are the values of the organization? Do you want to have people who are fired up about working for your company? How do you build that? So it starts with, do I respect? Do I have respect and appreciate and bring out the best in people? There's the analogy of a workplace in many ways like a greenhouse. Do you have a greenhouse being a place that's conducive for growing plants? Have I created a workplace that's conducive for bringing the best out in other people? So it starts with saying, what do I want? And then how do I model that? And how do I, as the leader, and, Rhett, you and I both have a really good friend in Alan Mullally, who is, I think, one of the greatest leaders of our time. And Alan had said to me, it all starts with the leader. The leader has to have zero tolerance for people who violate the culture. So taking command starts with leadership. And it's not about excuses. It's not about blaming my people. I've got the worst people. I've got people. No, what can I do? What's my role? And on the other side, the employee says, well, gosh, this is so hard. I'm working, but where's the opportunity? Because really, if I've got the mindset, there are people who are getting promoted every day. There are people who are getting the dream jobs every day. Why is it that they are? It's partly because they've got the right mindset and they're willing to do what it takes to put the work behind that mindset and make it happen. So, everything in my mind starts with that mindset. It starts with our thoughts and how we see things and how we frame things, and then how we back that up by the actions and the skills that we have.
Yeah.
It's very obvious that all the problems start at the top until you're at the top, right? And then it's like the other way around. What about employees trying to manage up with limited resources? Like how do you do that?
Well, so the number one question I usually get when I'm giving a conversation about, say, culture or say psychological safety, right? And let me just back up. I was in Japan not long before the pandemic, and I was talking to the CEO of a major company who said, I have the most brilliant software engineers in Japan here, but many people are afraid to speak up, because they're concerned about how it would affect their career. And how do I get them to do that? And that's, I think, a challenge that all leaders face, which is how do I get my team members, the people in my company, to be comfortable speaking up, to share their ideas. I want an innovative company. I want an agile company. I want a resilient company. But do people feel psychologically safe? So as a leader, do I create that environment? But the number one question I get when I give a talk like that from people is, hey, look, I don't have any direct reports. I'm just a person here. What can I do? Well, the answer is you can do everything you can to create the environment that you want. So are you someone who is, you're in a meeting, and think about the time that you're in a meeting and someone had an idea and says, that's just the worst idea. That's never going to work. Well, that person is creating a cultural impact in terms of whether people are willing to speak up, and the leader, if they allow that to happen, is allowing that to be part of the culture. So I know of teams, small teams, that have gotten together and have said, let's be kind of the light in the company for the kind of culture we want to have. And they start to have this impact, and people say, wow, what are you doing? So the answer is, I think, yes, I've got limited resources. Yes, I'm struggling. I'm going to do the very best I can. I'm going to communicate, but, I'm going to think about what can I do? And by the way, if the environment's not the right one for me, because I have to have boundaries, and maybe it's a toxic environment, then this is where I might say, you know what? I'm not going to be that disengaged person who's just complaining all the time. I'm going to just go find the right opportunity for me. So that's kind of how I see it.
Well, that's the courageousness that you're talking about, right? That's the courageous part, I think. Talk about, and you talk a lot about in the book about intentional at work, what you were saying in that is that you have to have your values aligned in alignment, and that is so hard. I work with companies all the time, and I see that where that's not happening, right? And it's not that easy for companies to get that part right, because I do believe that values, our values should drive our focus. They should drive our decision making. When times get tough, you fall back on your values to make those tough decisions. And why do we miss that? Why do we mess that up so often as leaders? Because I think that is so critical. I think it's one of the biggest takeaways, really.
Yeah, so you're saying people either who haven't defined their values or people who find themselves compromising their values?
Both. I mean, compromised and their values at work. I mean, their personal values aren't in sync with what the company's stated values are, right? And I do this exercise when I go into companies, and we do values work, and we do the company values, and then we do the personal values, and it's surprising to me that often in the company leadership, the personal values often aren't in sync with the company values, and to me that leads to a lot of tough conversations, and it's one of the reasons for unhappiness and that engagement that we're talking about. I don't know if that question makes any sense. I'm rambling, I feel like, but values is so important, and I think we get it wrong a lot of times.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of it is, how does the company do in articulating its values? And then, am I honest about whether or not I'm aligned to those values? Because you're absolutely right, Rhett. Where there is that kind of disalignment, that creates tension, unhappiness, frustration,
trust,
but often
trust issues.
Trust issues, but often, there are different ways that a person, an employee, might be able to handle that. I mean, one is, and people are often afraid, and I think fear is the thing. We talk a lot about that in part one of the book, and I like, there's this quote, I'm not even sure who said this, but everything we want's on the other side of fear, right? So everything we want's on the other side of fear, and yet we're often afraid to cross that. So, I say to myself, I look at the company, I'm like, gosh, these values, or this person said this, or this person, my boss is acting this way, but we make assumptions. Why not, at least first have the conversation? Hey, I'm just curious about some of the values that I see here. I know you love this company and I love this company. I want to see this company succeed and thrive. And I want to be a big part of making that happen. I'm a little concerned because I saw this and this and this. And so how can we reconcile that? Or, but just, is there a willingness to even have that conversation? That's part of the, so what's the employee's responsibility in taking command? And, ultimately, if it is a place where the values are misaligned, people are often afraid to leave. They're afraid. And then we've got, what's the rowing analogy? If you've got 10 people rowing on a boat, you got 2 people rowing forward, you've got 2 people rowing the other way, and you got the other people that's kind of in the middle. We don't want people who are rowing the other way. It's like, okay, look, if I'm unhappy here, part of taking command is and this is my future. What's the vision I have for myself? Do I want to see myself in a company where I'm miserable for 20 years? No. I mean, part of the reason I left the practice of law, I think I was a successful lawyer, but not a happy lawyer. I know many people who stay in the practice of law for 40 years, not particularly happy. That's not a great way to live. If you're happy, and it's a great way to make a living, and it's a great thing to do if there's alignment. So, but ultimately, what's your vision for yourself? What are your values? And starting with those kinds of questions is really, really important.
And that's what you mean by being intentional, right?
100%. Yeah, I think a lot of times, the other thing, Rhett and Cynthia, that's interesting to me is, just how quickly time goes by, right? It's like, here we're going into June. It seems like it was just January. I just turned 55 last week. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was fast, but if we're not intentional and we don't stop and say, what do I want? And what am I committed to work toward myself? I might find 10 years have gone by, and we see people get to these points of crisis in their life where they're like, gosh, what's it all about? Don't get to that point. Take action. If you're in a job that you don't like, work to bring about change in the job. If you can't bring about change in the job, maybe it's find something else. Maybe it's start your own thing. But, but we have to start first by taking command of our thoughts and our emotions, those things within ourselves that hold us back. If we do that, then we can advance and take command of our relationships and take command of our futures.
Yeah, it's really powerful to hear that, because you do hear it a lot. My perspective, you hear it a lot when you haven't gone all the way to the career level of something, right? You're like, just quit or try something new. But once you've hit that sort of career marker moment, it's people take the other direction. Look how far you've come. Just keep going. Like, you'll make it, just like, make it where, like, how do you find the right person? Because, a lot of this has got to be feedback based. Where do you find the right person, the right coach, the right sounding board to help you decide if it's a quitting situation or something to power through?
Yeah, so finding good mentors is vital. And we do talk about that in the book, about really creating a, I don't want to call it a network. It's a community. It's a community of people who might be aligned around your values, and really it's supporting other people, and it's people supporting you. It's working together. Rhett, again, our friend Al Mullally talks about working together. But my experience is that we talk about this, is that mentors are all around us. There are always people who are willing to help if we're willing even to ask. I mean, identifying someone who has been successful, or someone that we respect, and just saying, hey, do you mind? Can we talk? And sitting down, whether it's a coffee or a Zoom or whatever it is, and just having that conversation. Hey, Cynthia, you're someone to really respect, and I really appreciate how you've been able to achieve A, B, C, and D. Do you mind if I ask some questions about that? In my experience, that I've had mentors throughout my entire career, I can't think of anyone who's ever said, no, I'm not willing to talk to you, or I'm not willing to help you. And in fact, people have asked me many times, it's the same thing. It's like, we want to pay it forward. So, I think, but what holds us back? I remember someone invited me to be on her podcast, and she said, I was really afraid to ask you to be on my podcast. I was like, well, I'm glad she did. I said, well, I'm delighted to be in your podcast. But we might not approach someone. We might say, oh gosh, I couldn't ask Cynthia to be my mentor. I couldn't ask Cynthia to meet me for coffee to get some advice. Why not? What's the worst that's going to happen? Cynthia says, no, I'm too busy. I can't. Okay, no problem. But the other thing is, frankly, finding people is a really important part of it. But what about ourselves? Because often it's the things we say to ourselves and the way that we talk to ourselves that really is just vicious. Sometimes we say things to ourselves that we would never say to anyone else. Or we think things like, oh, there's no way I could do this. I'm horrible. So in the first part of the book, we talk about this, taking command of your thoughts, paying attention to them, conditioning your mind for success. How do we build a mindset that supports me? So I've got to support myself. And then I've got relationships. People are going to work with me, but I need to be able to have that confidence myself. How do I develop that confidence? How do I develop that inner courage? How do I develop that resilience? And we can all do it. Every one of us can do it if we know how, and if we're willing to take the steps.
Well, I'm writing a book on self-talk right now, so I am going to send you a copy because I'd love for you to read and get your take on it, because it is so critical.
I'd love to see that. That's great. Yeah.
The sort of the final question, and I hate to wrap it up because I'm sure we could go on and on. The importance of listening. I feel like we often love to hear ourselves talk, and we often, when we're having a conversation with a person, we're thinking about the next thing that we're going to say and not really listening, and we're not asking enough questions. And I know sometimes we feel like maybe we don't want to ask the boss a tough question or seem like we're being critical, but we often do that at the cost of not getting what we need, right? What are there some strategies or ways that we can do that are non-threatening, that give us the license to, or give us a way to ask these tough questions in a better way, or a way that's not going to endanger us or threaten, because I think that's what we do it often out of fear, right? We don't ask that question because we're afraid we're going to make somebody upset.
Yeah, and that's a real fear. And most of us want to avoid conflict, particularly if it's with our boss. So that's an understandable kind of thing. One of the things we teach, actually, I've got this golden book that we have in Dale Carnegie, which is it's a list of Dale Carnegie's strategies for how do you interact with people and how do you have tough conversations. We believe you can say almost anything if you know how to say it. And part of this is it's building trust, but it's also beginning in a friendly way. If I'm talking to you, Rhett, and you're my boss, and talking in terms of your interests, so it's, hey, Rhett, one thing I know is really important to you is A, B, C, and D. Would it be valuable if I had some thoughts to talk to you about that? Would you want to hear those thoughts? Yeah, I'd like this. Would it be okay? I mean, so part of it is talking in terms of the other person's interests, and assuming positive intent, I think, is a big part too. We often assume negative intent about other people, even when we don't know. And that also contributes to the fear. But I think that's a big way to, to do it. It's not to accuse, it's to give someone the benefit of the doubt, it's to ask questions. It's, as exactly you said, Rhett, it's to listen, to what someone has said. And it's my experience. You can have very, very tough conversations if you are constructive and honest, and you come with the right heart in having that conversation. Doesn't mean they're always going to go well, right? I mean, but you can have them, and that's the most important part, because again, in my experience, so many conversations that I might have been hesitant to have actually went way better than I thought, and that's one of the things that is, I think, true for many of us.
And it's such a relief after having it too, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because you build up that anxiety about that conversation, and it's often those self-deprecate or those self-talk that's really getting in the way of that. But you're right.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to reading your book on self-talk. It's exactly right, because we will tell ourselves, I could never have that conversation with Cynthia or with Rhett. I could never. Well, why? Why are we saying that? I mean, instead of saying, could I do it? It's in what ways could I do it? What would I have to do this? It's asking the right questions.
And I like the way you framed it, right? You're doing it, you have that conversation based on their interest, right? You try to frame the conversation that is positive for them, but you still get what you need, right?
That's exactly right. If I know you, and I can say, and what's important to Rhett here, I'm not going to, if I come and just say, look, this is important to me and I want to talk to you about it. I mean, you're going to go like this. You're going to get, it puts people on the defensive. So don't put people on the defensive. Just, come at it. And so again, Rhett, I know this is important to you. How important is it to you that we do this as a business? Well, very important. What are some of the reasons why it's important? I mean, get him talking and that type of thing.
Right.
Yeah. I love, that's such a better way to do it. Just thinking of the moments where I'm like, going into it, it's like, I can't stand another minute unless I have this conversation. Like, no one wants to enter that space in that room. It's no, I'm yeah, you've I feel very seen. Thank you. Thank you for today. Yeah, no, really, thank you for being here. This was an amazing conversation. And I guess I'm going to go back and reread yours, and then also How to Influence People, right? Because it clearly had a huge influence on your life, and it's how to show up in the world. I think you're a really incredible case study on that. Maybe someone will write that book one day.
Oh, well, thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate that. Just on your point, How to Win Friends and Influence People is a masterpiece. And people have said to me, it's like, what do I do after I read Take Command? And I really hope that Take Command is going to have a huge impact on people and on the world. It's based on Dale Carnegie's principles, which are super sound, proven over time. But yeah, I mean, my hope is that people will go back and read How to Win Friends and Influence People, read How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, take a Dale Carnegie course. I mean, frankly, if I hadn't taken that Dale Carnegie course, and you think about the pivot points in your life, the way your life can turn on a dime, you see yourself, I'm not going to do that. Oh my gosh, my entire life changed. And if you can Google Warren Buffett, he says the same thing. If Warren Buffett, Dale Carnegie, took a Dale Carnegie course, the entire life changed. So it's pretty incredible what can happen when we do take action and when we do the things that we think are the right things.
Well, the book is called Take Command. I'm guessing you can get it on Amazon and all the places you get good books. And thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you, Rhett. Thank you, Cynthia. Great to be with you both.
You as well. And thank you everyone for watching. We are Bestseller TV. We will be back next week with another episode. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, Rhett. Bye, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.